meeting of the 9th of December. Due to government guidelines on social distancing, members of the press and public will not be able to attend the meeting, and the meeting will be available to watch live at www.thurrock.gov.uk/webcast. And equally, because of social distancing measures, there are a number of the Cabinet who won't be present today, but are on Teams from their homes, and indeed we are joined via Teams by the Monitoring Officer and Councillor Gerrish for an item on the agenda as we go through. Just for clarification, when we go to items for discussion or for vote, I will ask for discussion from members in the chamber first of all, and then to members who are dialed in remotely. And then should there need to be any kind of count in relation to a vote, again, we'll do that first of all in the chamber and then to members who are remote. I'm going to move to apologies for absence. I've had one apology for absence, and that's Councillor Andrew Jeffries. Is there any other? None? Thank you. We'll move to item 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting, as can be found at pages 5 to 14. Are there any questions or statements in relation to the minutes? I can see none in the chamber or remotely. So with that, I'll move that the minutes are correct. Agreed? Agreed. Item 3, items of urgent business. I've received no items of urgent business for this evening's meeting. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to the meeting this evening? I'm seeing a great deal of shaking of heads on the screen, and there's none in the chamber. Moving on to item 5, which is my statement. Unfortunately, we'll see a regular and indeed daily change to our current figures in relation to the COVID situation. Indeed, when I typed up the speech for today, yesterday, it's changed in a way quite significantly, and I'll make that clear shortly. I'm not going to break down, as I've done before, by each age bracket. Unfortunately, as I say, it's an ever-moving feast. All I can say is, as of today, we are looking at 224 actual positive tests per 100,000 population, and we have moved from 40th of the local authority rankings out of 149, where 1 is the highest. We've moved from 40th to 17th as of this evening. You'll see from those much shortened figures that rates are going up and they're not coming down. There are some positives in that. We do see a reduction in those aged over 60, and that seems to be continuing. But we are seeing a general trend upwards. Some of our neighbouring authorities are currently seeing a much higher rates than we are. We are currently in the sub-region of with Essex County Council on Southend. So we all need to work together within that area to try and bring down the transmission of this virus. Any decision that will be made into relation to the tiers are made by government, and we will be notified of that position next week. And obviously between now and then we'll do all we can to at least remain in tier 2. The only way that we are going to either remain in tier 2 or indeed move down into tier 1 is for all of us to practice hands, face, space, to make sure that we are social distancing wherever we are, whether it be out shopping or going for our exercise. And please, everybody, and I noticed it quite a lot today in the short time I was out, in the larger shops, people are adhering to keeping their masks on, but I do see in smaller and corner shops that people are just walking in and out without them. It doesn't matter what shop it is, you do need to practice hands, face, space at all times. And we'll be working with our small businesses to ensure that they remain COVID compliant and indeed safe for all of our residents to use. We're entering into the last few days of the annual Give a Gift campaign to make sure our local children who are in need get some Christmas presents this year. Instead of having to store into Lakeside Shopping Centre, as we have done in previous years, we've had to run this online to ensure the safety of our residents and council staff. The online donations you can find at the Amazon wish list are open until midnight on Sunday. We're now looking mainly for donations, which will be used to buy vouchers for older children and teenagers, the kinds of gifts that they would choose rather than the ones that we would buy for ourselves for children within that group. You can find out all the details on this at thurrock.gov.uk, and I urge all members to support the campaign by sharing information directly from the Council's Facebook and Twitter accounts. You will also receive an email from the communications team with images on, to share directly through your own accounts to help drive up this fantastic annual campaign. I've got to say, I did mine fairly early on. It was very easy. Actually, it was much easier than going out and trying to work out what I should buy and for whom. So well done, the staff and all those that have helped in organising this. And obviously, our thanks to Amazon also for being able to do this. Indeed, some of those people that I do speak to up and down the country have also put their hands in their pockets. Indeed, one of my friends from overseas has also, which was really quite good. I'm also pleased to announce, as you would have seen, that all children that are eligible for free school meals in Thurrock will be shortly receiving a weekly £15 voucher for each of the 2 weeks over the Christmas holidays. This is being grant funded as part of the over £250,000 worth of government winter grant scheme, and the vouchers will be available from Monday the 14th of December and will be issued directly through the schools to all the 6,200 eligible children. This will also apply to the half-term holiday later in February, I believe. And obviously, beyond that, we'll be working with government and indeed all the fantastic organisations locally that helped out to make sure that no child goes hungry in Thurrock during the last half-term holiday, and indeed with all the charities that indeed help all year round to help this out. I know, not that people will ever believe it, but in the past, when I was much younger, my family became eligible for a gift from the Rotary Club, which actually saw us through Christmas and was probably one of the best Christmas presents we ever got. So, and that was many years ago. So we'll be continuing that kind of work to ensure that that happens again. And as I said, that no child goes hungry in Thurrock. Our Transforming Homes programme has continued in progress this well. Improvement works have been carried out or completed on the outside of the 41 blocks, and 205 households have benefited for replacement windows. The housing communal and external decoration programme is also underway. So far, Derwent Parade, Derry Drive, Daglin Avenue in South Ockenden have been benefited from the redecoration of the stairwells. The communal entrance doors and stairwells of the balconies of Eve Court Greys have also been decorated. I have seen the before and after pictures, certainly of the Derwent Parade improvements, and I've got to say it's like two different places. So an absolutely fantastic well done to staff and contractors who managed to do that. I know that the residents in there are saying that it feels much nicer and safer. And whilst we continue this programme, obviously, during the pandemic, we will get round to more and more properties to make them certainly look and feel more like home and safe. Local plans and its next part. The next steps in our consultation. Next step has started for the local plan. It's begun today. Following the recent Your Place, Your Voice events, it's designed to help create a direction shaped by the community for the new Thurrock plan. The council has partnered with the Prince's Foundation to ensure its BIMBY, and I keep getting that wrong, so I do apologise, toolkit. BIMBY stands for Beauty in My Backyard, and the toolkit is designed to be delivered by the Prince's Foundation. It enables the community, organisations and local authorities to create a collaborative design and development principles for the local area. This borough-wide public engagement is asking residents to shape and grow the places where they live. I know if Councillor Coxon wants to add to that after this, it would be welcome, but I know the charrette that's already taken place went down very, very well in Averley, and some really good ideas. So this is truly working with the community to make sure this local plan works for all and delivers for not only those that live here now, but all those that will be coming to live in Thurrock in the future. Very quickly, clean it, cut it, fill it figures. We filled 1,938 potholes, every single one of them within agreed timescales. 2,060 tonnes of litter from our streets have been cleared. 814 fly tips have been cleared. We've issued 2,342 fixed penalty tickets for things such as antisocial behaviour, littering and dropping cigarette ends. I will add in, and this came from some casework earlier today, there is still help for businesses, so I would urge any business person operating in Thurrock, if they are struggling and they are able to benefit from the discretionary scheme, to make an application as soon as they possibly can. And equally for residents on bills, I understand from our collections manager there have been quite a number of people in contact with them this year, quite obviously saying that times have changed very significantly for them and they're struggling to pay bills that are due to the council. We're working with every single one of them on an individual basis, and those that are quite clearly in need, we will do all we possibly can to ensure some payment plan is in place, but only when residents do contact us, and residents have been very, very good at contacting us. And indeed, it's not just council tax or for rent, it's for pretty much every single bill that the council will collect on. If you are struggling and having problems, please contact them as soon as possible and work with us rather than face extra court costs and extra stress and worry when we go through a recovery process, something that we don't like doing and something that we'd like to avoid. But as this is the last Cabinet of the year, I'd obviously like to take this opportunity to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and indeed a Happy New Year. While the festive season is not going to be the same as it is for everybody, and there will be more people potentially isolated, I also wish everybody in the borough the same. But please, when you are out enjoying yourself and meeting your family from a week after next, then please do follow the government guidelines, do stay safe, and let's do our best to keep down the infection rates, not only in Thurrock, but indeed right across the country. So moving on that, briefings on policy, budget and other issues. I know that Councillor Johnson's got one, so I shall pass Councillor Johnson first and Councillor Mays. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Leader. I'm sure all of my colleagues on Cabinet are aware of the continued reporting of damp and mould concerns within our high-rise blocks, something that certainly predates all of us as councillors whilst existing across different party administrations. There really is no quick fix or one-size-fits-all solutions, and whilst I know this is a very, very busy time and it's going to continue to be a busy time for the council, I'd like to announce that I have asked for a paper to come forward in the new year, searching for the best way to move forward in the short, medium and long term. It will include dealing with the problem now, how best to support residents in working to tackle the problem together, with the study to include the options of refurbishing and the feasibility of bringing them down and rehousing, enabling us to build something more sympathetic to the area with improved efficiency, but most of all, the paper will look at ensuring our tenants are safe and secure for the future. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I don't like to say, well, we've spent more than the previous administration on trying to solve this problem, or we've done more or anything. It doesn't matter who's spending the money and who's doing what, as long as we are doing it. I don't agree with some of the statements that have been made that we're doing far too little in relation to this. You and I have had many conversations to move this forward, and I really do look forward to that paper, as I'm sure not only does the rest of Cabinet, but the whole of our tenancy group. Not all high-rise blocks are affected by this, not all flats in all high-rise blocks are affected by it. Indeed, it's not just high-rises, there are medium-rise and indeed houses that still suffer and suffer quite badly from this problem. So working with residents to see what we can do in the short term, medium and long term is definitely the right approach. So thank you. Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very pleased to say that Thurrock has been chosen as one of 10 sites for a mobile lung testing facility. It was delivered on Monday of this week and is located at the Thurrock Hospital site in Grays. If you're aged between 55 and 74, and have ever smoked, you'll receive a letter or text from your doctor to ask you to go and have a low-risk CC scan. It is COVID secure and will allow for early detection of lung cancer, and if caught early enough, can be treated. In regards to COVID, the fantastic news that the UK has granted the approval of the Pfizer vaccine. It's one of the first in the Western world, which is absolutely fantastic. And what it means is that the rollout has started this week. The NHS locally have started to do this from Basildon Hospital, and we've started to see our first Thurrock residents started to be vaccinated, which I think is fantastic news, and it's the start of a process. It's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be a sudden shock and everything is back to normal. People will be vaccinated over a period of time as we help move forward with our fight against this virus. However, with the rollout still going on, we must all continue to keep doing what we can to keep the virus numbers down. So what we need to do is still follow the guidance with the national tier system, follow hands, face, space, and together we can drive down the numbers and try and get back to normal as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Councillor Mays. And we literally cannot say hands, face, space often enough. Everybody plays their part in this. Every single person, every single time they leave the house, every single time they go into work premises or shops or go for a walk or meet up with people. It really is down to us all. And as some of us would have seen within the group, some of our supporters have had their injections yesterday as part of their workplace. So it's really good to see that, and I'll be engaging direct with those as well to see their experience. One of the things that we all need to do, when I say all, that's all of local government, irrespective of party, irrespective of what we do for a living, is to do our utmost to promote this, make very clear this is what is needed to be done to get this country back on its feet and as back to as normal as it possibly can. But as you said, it's no quick fix. We will still need to practice hands, face, space, and we need to follow the advice, as this will be a long rollout, and we need to do all we can to not be having this conversation next Christmas, or indeed Easter, or the summer, as soon as possible. So thank you. Any other members with an update at all? I've got shaking of heads on line, I've got shaking of heads in the chamber, so thank you. Moving on to item 7, petitions submitted by members of the public. Clark, no, we've got none. And questions submitted by non-exec members, and we have none. Matters referred to Cabinet for consideration by overview and scrutiny. We've got none. But I am very, very pleased to move on to item 10, which is kind of links to item 9, which is the overview and scrutiny at Thurrock, the review that's been undertaken. That can be found at pages 15 to 62. And I welcome Councillor Gerrish, who's the chair of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to present this report to Cabinet. Councillor Gerrish.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think, first of all, in presenting this, it's right to thank Democratic Services for their hard work in putting this together. In particular, Lucy Tricker, who's done a huge amount of work. She's driven this project and done a great job of pulling it all together. So I think although I'm presenting it this evening, Lucy and the team definitely deserve the credit. So thank you, Lucy and team, for all of your work on this. The review itself has been a very lengthy one, in part because of COVID-19, but also because we wanted to make this a genuine cross-party process that included good representation and input from scrutiny chairs, from scrutiny members, and indeed from members of the executive. So my thanks go to all members that were involved in the process, and indeed to those members of Cabinet who attended the Executive Scrutiny Workshop and made a number of suggestions, all of which I'm pleased to say we've incorporated into the final document that we're presenting this evening. The aim was to understand how we can improve the structures around scrutiny at Thurrock Council. We heard a huge range of issues from members at the start of the process, but I think foremost amongst them was that there was a general desire that scrutiny should result in actions and improvement and not be a talking shop. My view is that we need to make scrutiny more effective, more relevant and more impactful, but to retain the important separation of roles between the executive and scrutiny. To put it simply, the executive decides and scrutiny doesn't. However, scrutiny, if used wisely, should have a full role in contributing to policy development, in exploring council priorities, in reviewing and challenging council policy, and in providing robust challenge. So the key recommendations are set out on page 22, and they're divided into structural recommendations, which can be actioned straight away, and developmental recommendations, which we anticipate will require further work over the course of the next year with the chairs and scrutiny committees. I think the most important recommendation is recommendation 1, which establishes a formalised protocol between the executive and scrutiny. And this takes on the form of operating guidelines which add to and build on the Council's constitution to establish a number of new ways of working. And if I could, to give you a few examples of the types of change that we are talking to. So first of all, a more formal recognition of scrutiny feedback and the guidance on how that needs to be reported to Cabinet for an item under consideration. I think many members of scrutiny, myself included, have often had frustration in the past that scrutiny would make a recommendation, but actually the process of getting that into minutes, getting that sort of formally written up and taken to Cabinet wasn't always a very straightforward one. And I think often some of the conversations that were had at scrutiny weren't well presented to Cabinet for part of the wider consideration. So second, if you look at how it sets out some of the powers of the committee to compel officers and executive members to attend, and establishing an annual agenda item to ask questions of the relevant portfolio holder committee. Again, though, balanced by the need to ensure that those questions are fair and allow portfolio holders the opportunity to understand that question in detail and to receive briefings on it. And then thirdly, for example, to allow chairs to take advantage of a process of addressing concerns to Cabinet via a chair's letter, which has to be formally responded to. Again, a formalisation of a process which can already exist, but I think helps to put that relationship on a more formal footing and to have an opportunity to ensure that those things are responded to in a very clear and succinct way. So I think taken together, those and the other items in the protocol tackle many of the issues that members have raised over recent years, and will start to make scrutiny play a more important and mature role in how the council works. And I think, I have to take questions on the item, but I'll sum up there by saying there's a lot more that we could have included here. I think there are a number of areas, such as the involvement of members of the public, where I'd like to see additional work done to build on this starting point, and I think it's important that that continues. I think it's taken a fairly long time to get to this point, but I hope that now by adopting this report, we can begin to build on this framework in the future and ensure that our scrutiny function delivers a real and meaningful contribution to the wider work of the Council. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions on that point.
Thank you, Councillor Gerrish. I've got, Councillor Howden in the chamber first, and then Councillor Cockshaw in the chamber.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Gerrish, for your report. I do welcome this. I think good scrutiny, good opposition does create good government. Constant challenge is a pretty good incentive for those of us in the executive to get it right. No one in the executive wants to end up in the newspaper for a mistake. I think we have made some progress in trying to make things more cross-party and consensual. For example, making sure that all members get the opportunity to have their say over assistant director appointments on general services. I have to admit that there are some areas, though, in this report that do come down to individual members acting on their own. So, for example, the commentary about wanting scrutiny to have more power to challenge the executive. I know that Councillor Cockshaw has appeared in front of the Planning, Transport Regeneration Committee and not been allowed to speak. The last time I attended the Children's Scrutiny meeting and the Health Scrutiny meeting, on both occasions, Labour members complained that I was taking up time. And as everyone knows, I am the model of brevity. I think in 4 years in power, we have only ever had one person formally summoned to a committee to answer questions, and that was Councillor Hebb. So I would say that I do welcome this report, and I do support the recommendations, and I will vote for the recommendations, but we can create the content to scrutinise. That doesn't come with an embossed invitation. It does require people to come forward and actively apply that challenge to us. But I think Councillor Gerrish has got a good point. There is lots more we can do. I personally have always thought for a borough as busy as Thurrock, we should have something like a liaison committee of all the scrutiny chairs to go after the cross-cutting areas. And I think that there are a few procedural issues at full council that we all want to iron out. They were a frustration for me when I was an opposition councillor. So to that end, Leader, I would like to, if Councillor Gerrish wants to accept an extra recommendation, across 2021, we asked the monitoring officer to convene a constitution working group to work with all members to consider some of these procedural issues and slowly embed them throughout the constitution. I think good scrutiny does lend to good government, and we can make those structural changes, and if he accepts those recommendations, we can make further structural changes next year. But my plea would be that we create the content to scrutinise, and members have to then use the powers that are already in the Constitution and new powers that we would like to put in the Constitution to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Howden. Councillor Coxwell?
I'd just like to build on that, and Councillor Gerrish, and it's an interesting exercise. I think I was unable to speak and answer the questions, which were, and it's very difficult with a chair because I think it's good that you get that answers from officers, unbiased, and to get that detail. But again, then sometimes it makes the officers in an awkward position when they can't answer. There's a political question being made, and it puts them in an awkward position. So I do like that idea that there is an opportunity yearly to actually question the cabinet member, because that's the policy decisions are decisions of the council, and it needs to be scrutinised just as much as the operational decisions what overview and scrutiny are doing at the moment. So I think that change is really important. But I do, we're at all caution, because overview and scrutiny has got to get to the deep dive into that, and it shouldn't be an opportunity for the office. There's a two-prong there. There's the policy, and there's the operational decisions of the overview and scrutiny, which is important to come back to the executive. And I think if we can get that right, I think the opportunities like I had earlier this year, where they were obviously awkward for my officers to answer questions that I had made policy decisions for. And it's not their job to answer them policy decisions. That's down to me. And I think getting that into overview and scrutiny to deep dive into that, other than the cabinet meeting here, which isn't really, it's a Labour invention, isn't it? A council government invention. It may need that, but we can't change that, what the cabinet is. But we could change the overview and scrutiny. And I do think across instead of the working groups, I think something around the chairs working together could improve chair quality of some chairs with good cross-feeding between chairs.
Thank you, Councillor Coxwell. I'm going to do Councillor Hebb in the chamber, then if there's nobody else in the chamber, then I'll do Councillor Hewlin. So, Councillor Hebb.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Gerrish, and equally, thank you to Democratic Services, because clearly there's been a heck of a lot of time invested into building something which is as comprehensive as it is in front of us. I'm just reflecting on some of the reflections. I think if I look at point one, Councillor Gerrish made the point. I think that's a fair point. I think clarity of the handover between scrutiny over to the executive to make decisions informed with the input of the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee is something that we should build on. I totally support that. A point on the second point in terms of ensuring overview and scrutiny have an overarching topic. Councillor Howden mentioned about, I suppose, it's characters who have led committees before. You know, certainly, Councillor Gerrish, as one of your predecessors in your committee, I obviously pioneered the whole resident discussion about an evolution of the electoral system in Thurrock, which led to a public consultation which come back at 60-40% favour of changing the way that we elect our councillors and members across the borough, only for it to fall at the hurdle of the 49 councillors, which didn't feel very democratic at the time, and it still doesn't. That said, your point reflecting on how we engage with residents and certainly take full regard of resident views, I think is impactful, and I hope you bear that in good stead. In terms of the third section around the portfolio holders being invited to attend, totally agree. That is why I was particularly proud of the recommendation which enabled shadow portfolio holders to have greater recognition in our constitution, Councillor Gerrish, and also give you opposition portfolio holders the opportunity to quiz mono a mono between portfolio holder. I think sometimes, reflecting on your point, Councillor Howden, sometimes it can feel like you're going around a tick box exercise of here's this person, here's that person. Actually, let the shadow and the cabinet member have a bit of a sparring session if necessary, or a scrutiny session. I think that's quite sensible. And then just reflecting on points 9 and 10 around the to note reports and the work programme. I think this has always been governed by characteristic, and I think it's a bit of a shame that we have to formalise it to make a change. I'm sure Karen Wheeler will attest, because we used to smile about it quite a lot, that if any report come with to note on it, I would rip it up and send it back. We worked very well together, and we always made sure that the reports were very action orientated, so I totally support that. Again, I think it goes back to the character of the chairperson. You're seeking to formalise it. I totally support it. I think it's just a bit of a shame that that's been needed. And again, the work programme. I mean, with respect, when I become the chairman rather than the vice chair of corporate, I arranged a work programme discussion before our first meeting. It's now formalised, which is a good thing. I suppose it's a good type of insurance, but going back on Councillor Coxall's point, we need to be making sure that members are genuinely leading the discussion, and I think this gets to it. So overall, Councillor Gerrish, I think it's a good report. In terms of Councillor Haldon's recommendation, I think, yes, we should continue to evolve. I think we've obviously built considerably over the last 12 months, if we go back to October 2019, in terms of some of the constitutional changes that we've made, some of the changes that Councillor Gerrish's committee are putting forward here, and I think we should continue to look at that.
Thank you, Councillor Hebb. Councillor Hewley.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Gerrish, for your report, and officers. I think that you've done a really good job. Thank you for allowing me to come along to the workshop. I really enjoyed it. I think that two-way conversation, open conversation, really led to the fact that we could see that members didn't necessarily understand their role as chair, or even realise in some cases that they could invite portfolio holders to the meetings. So it's good to see recommendation 3 and 4 in there. I think it was clear that we do need chairs to take a responsibility to understand their role, as Councillor Hebb has said. I've welcomed having that more conversations with my shadow portfolio holder. There you get some good ideas bounce off of each other, and that does help take it through, especially on the community side and being with the collaborative communities paper. I also welcome number 9 in developmental recommendations, a number of to note reports to be reduced by emailing so that you can note them, freeing up more time to do the real job of overview and scrutiny, because that's what we really want. I mean, I think most cabinet members, we welcome that feed across from yourselves. Otherwise, we've got nothing to question ourselves and set ourselves against.
Thank you, Councillor Hewley. Either of the other 2 members that are remote got any statements before I pass over to Councillor Gerrish to respond? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hebb, you've got something to add?
It's actually a question in terms of section 9. Councillor Gerrish, I don't know, or Democratic Secretary, I don't know if the answer's clear, but in terms of the to note reports, I totally get that for every reason I've already said. Is there a mechanism for reverting back in the public section of the meeting, Councillor Gerrish, in terms of just recapping what discussions have been had as a to note? Is that the intention, or is it purely just to take off any to note conversations offline?
Councillor Gerrish.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll go through those if I can in order. So I think Councillor Haldon originally brought up the question of how different chairs can often have slightly different styles and approaches in the way that they tackle issues and who to invite. I think that's a point well made, and I think a number of people made that this evening. I think one of the advantages of having a more mature protocol is that there's clear understanding from all of the chairs in terms of, first of all, what their powers are, but also in terms of how they approach some of the things that we feel are probably beneficial for the wider council. I think certainly for me, policy discussions taking place at a higher level, having those portfolio holders invited to committee meetings to answer questions on policy areas and decisions is certainly one of those. Councillor Haldon also raised the point on bringing forward a constitutional working group from 2021 to continue the changes and to look at sort of further areas of additional change that we might want to bring forward. I think that's very welcome. I hope that conversation does continue into the next municipal year. Councillor Coxall raised the question on the split between policy and operational issues, and again, I would agree with that. I think Again, I think there's a role for guidance to members here in terms of the split between portfolio holder responsibilities and officer responsibilities. But clearly, one of the facets of a mature scrutiny organisation is knowing how to direct those questions between members and officers in terms of the types of decisions and responsibilities that are held. Councillor Hebb raised the to-note culture, and again, Councillor Hewlin raised a number of sort of related questions as well. And I think to try and summarise that from me, I think, again, part of this is making sure that chairs have the guidance on knowing how they can and should deal with some of these issues that are raised, and making sure, particularly where sort of people are new into that role as chair. I think in the past there's been kind of very clear training, I think, in terms of your technical powers, but in terms of how it's useful to be able to deal with things, I think less so. I think so for me, in terms of that to note culture, it's not an overnight change, but I think it's a gradual shift of culture as we do that kind of training and upskill chairs in the way that they deal with some of those issues. I would also, in terms of Councillor Hebb's question on the process of feedback to the public, I would hope that chairs would have the sense to understand the difference between those areas that are clearly important in the public interest to bring back for further conversation, and those items that are taken offline for convenience to note reports. And again, I think there's a developmental conversation to happen there over the next year, but I think those of us that are a little longer in the tooth should know the difference between those lines. Finally, I think the point was raised around portfolio holder, the conversations around the work programme and how they should take place before the start of the municipal year. And again, I think Councillor Hebb is correct in that. And I think, again, the marker of a more mature scrutiny organisation would be that members beyond purely the chair and members of that committee are involved in that. Certainly, it would be good to see portfolio holders involved in that conversation of what should be on that work programme for the year. And I think generally, as we look forward to future years, it'd be interesting to see how we can involve people like members of the public, outside organisations, and so on in setting that programme. I think I've covered most of the points that were raised there. Please do let me know if I've missed any, and I'm happy to circle back and address them.
Thank you, Councillor Gerrish. Councillor Hebb, just want to... Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you, Councillor Gerrish. I deliberately left mine till last. I thought that you, rather than sort of, stop them all up. Absolutely fantastic report. Both yourself and Councillor Hebb and I shared something in common. All three of us, have chaired the Corporate Overview Scrutiny Committee, or whatever it's called in its previous iterations. And I won't say it's a shame to see these in front of us this evening. It's great to see them. It's just a shame that I'm seeing them again from sort of 2006, 2008. For number one, you're absolutely quite right. It shouldn't be a talking shop. Overview Scrutiny's got a very good role to play, and it should be a part of effective decision making. And I was a bit shocked, to say the least, when I was speaking to a member of Overview Scrutiny last year, who said, but we discussed this at our Overview Scrutiny Committee and we passed it to you. And I'm looking blank, saying, well, I don't remember that. I do remember most things, but sometimes things do slip my memory. When I checked, it hadn't actually been passed up to myself or indeed Cabinet at all. It had been discussed, it had been noted and minuted, but the content of that hadn't been passed along. So getting that is absolutely vital. So again, well, I'm 100% in favour of everything here. Having the overarching topics of the year ties in with earlier reports, and indeed speaking to the relevant Cabinet member in relation to it. So again, it's a nice sort of golden thread through it. Portfolio holders are invited to attend Overview Scrutiny Committee to answer questions. With the exception of the ones that have been named this evening, I can't think of any Cabinet member that's been asked to go to Overview Scrutiny in the past, even though that ability's been there. Well, certainly not for the past sort of probably 5 or 6 years, which is a shame, because it's clearly in our role, and I'm glad that's been identified as something that needs to be strengthened. It's already been touched on with the to-note reports, and again, as Councillor Hebb said, I wouldn't accept to note reports at all. I don't accept to note reports that often on Cabinet. So perhaps we can, rather than to reduce it or to have them by email, is to actually strike out the term to note. And everything should be for overview and scrutiny to discuss the items and come forward with a recommendation. I think to note reports are a waste of officer time. They're far too busy doing very important things. It's kind of just a brush-off statement to overview and scrutiny, and the to note report, the note part, very rarely gets to Cabinet. So it kind of really strengthens that up and makes it important and makes it much more worthwhile from officer to Cabinet to overview and scrutiny and back again. Flow process. So I'm really glad that one was in there, but again, shocked to see it keeps on coming up. And the agreed motions process works effectively at Thurrock at number 7 with a quarterly update on motions. Absolutely brilliant idea. Again, we push through as a council. I'm not going to, again, this is not about politics, who did what, but we push through it as a council to make sure that our every meeting we have a 6 month up to 6 months worth of update, or until that item's been cleared. So to have overview and scrutiny take a bit of possession of that is absolutely fantastic. It does two things. Number one, shows that we're taking motions seriously, but more importantly, if we're missing bits, and quite often, we start a project and something changes, that flow and change is tracked. So, yeah, there's absolutely nothing on here anybody with any scrutiny or indeed Cabinet experience wouldn't agree with. So the sooner we can get this implemented, the better. And on top of your recommendations, I do back Councillor Howland's call for changes to the Constitution via Constitutional Working Group to do that. So if you're so minded to add that to it, when I'm sure that Cabinet will agree. I'm not going to talk for my Cabinet on that, but I'm sure they will. If not, I'm sure we'll work that through in a different process. So have you got anything to come back on with that?
Thank you, Chair, and welcome those comments. I think clearly there's wide acceptance that we need to improve the scrutiny process at Thurrock, and I think this gets us to the point where we start to make the progress on that we need. I think in terms of how the Constitution gets amended, happy to take advice on that. My understanding was from for the recommendations in front of us, we can probably go straight to any relevant changes to the Constitution to give those effect. More than happy to support a recommendation that says going forward we look at how we build in further changes via the Constitutional Working Group.
That's absolutely fantastic. If you can't see, there's plenty of nods online and indeed in the chamber. So it's really good to see everybody aligned on this. I don't think any Cabinet member, irrespective again of political party, wants to avoid challenge. Far from it. And I think this is the way to do it, and indeed enact it, and so it doesn't sit on the shelf. So whoever's sitting here or wherever we'll be sitting in 10 years' time isn't having the same kind of discussion with whomever is in doing committee, overview and scrutiny committee papers. So with that, I'm going to move the recommendations on page 15 at 1.1. The Cabinet approved recommendations as set out in Appendix 1 as they relate to Cabinet functions, and note those that pertain to the overview and scrutiny function, and that Cabinet approved the draft executive scrutiny protocol as attached at Appendix 1. Is that agreed in the chamber? Agreed on remotely. That's all agreed. Thank you very much, Councillor Gerrish. It's always good to see you. It's always good to see you at Cabinet. It'd be nice to see you more often at Cabinet. I think it would be much better if there were more attendance, because we could, those bits that might not be in the report that you remember from the committee can bring the recommendation to life a little bit more. So certainly not a pointed jibe or anything like that. It'd just be really good to have, irrespective of who the chairs are, them at our meetings more often, and equally us at yours more often. So with that, obviously you're more than welcome to stay or indeed continue watching online or enjoy your rest of your evening with your family. So thank you, Councillor Gerrish.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to move to Item 11, which is the financial update, which is pages 63 to 102. Councillor Hebb.
Thank you, Leader. The government provided top-level announcements at the Spending Review 2020 2 weeks ago today. And understandably, the detail around that is regarding the high-level messaging needs to be fully understood. And there's lots to work through, and the number crunching is actively underway. There are and have been discussions with the MHCLG, where it has been confirmed that a settlement position, and therefore the more specific detail needed for the very specific forecasting is expected to be provided to all councils, and we anticipate that arriving, hopefully, next week at some point. This will allow us to calculate how the Spending Review 20 positively affects the council's position. And it's clear that the government's response, on top of the £10 million plus already provided to Thurrock during the COVID crisis, it will help the situation, but it won't fix local government's problems. Taxes not to increase any further than what it has normally, i.e. the 2%, not above referendum limits, and the adult social care precept, now a semi-regular feature in local government budget setting, has also been announced again, meaning that there will be a 3% precept applied to maintain a struggling market which cares for our more vulnerable community. As the new calculations work is completed, we will certainly be sharing what the Government Spending Review 20 has done for helping pressures through the grant support in 2021, pressures experienced by all councils in a year like no other. Leader, we are at the point of not needing to keep talking about COVID being a new thing. It has been with us for 9 months, and whilst the visible moves forward in terms of the vaccine are very positive, COVID and the chaos around COVID, direct and indirect, obviously leaves chaos in its wake, and it will be seen and felt for some time. I've reported last time that for the first time since 2018, Thurrock moves away from a balanced budget for 4 out of 5 years presented in the medium-term financial strategy, with surpluses that could be used for public priorities and obviously the reserves position to support that, to a deficit position. Now, not accounting for the Spending Review 20, there is now a deficit of circa 33.6 million over 4 years, with a large part of that presenting itself next year to the tune of £19 million. Some councils have needed to hold an in-year emergency budget this year, where we have not had to do that, but action has had to be taken, and it is still being taken to this day. I think what is critical to understand is that budget setting for local government has often gone down to the 11th hour. I sort of muse on the Brexit deal discussions at the moment. Things like that do go down to the 11th hour, and more likely, more than ever, this will be true of all budgets across local government next February. We have plans in place. We continue to explore options with government, as other councils have done, Bexley, for example. But like any problem-solving activity, some ideas work, some don't. Some are permissible, some are not. There has been some discussion around around the conversation with the MHCLG around the capitalisation work around assets. It was an option. It's one that we are professionally challenging back on. But it just simply means that we will identify other options instead. The point being is that to reduce a revenue gap caused by COVID and a need to cease the investment approach, which I'll talk about in a small while in the same way that we have been doing it, we want to do what is in the council's span of control to do things which don't affect the people that we serve directly before defaulting to tax rises above referenda limits and quick, meaningful service cuts, which will take years to put right. Leader, we walked into this year with a surplus position of £4 million. This is a rearview mirror look report. Had COVID never happened, 6 months in, we would be at an almost break-even position. Surpluses and reserves fully intact at the same levels we started the year with. Offset by performance under budget in other departments, our Children's Social Care Department are projecting or are at a point of having a £0.9 million pressure against the budget of £40.2 million, which is about 2.23%. This is being driven by new placements that have come which are high cost and very complex. And don't forget, I'm not talking about the COVID impacts at the moment. The other change, of course, is from the council not pursuing new investments and performing a much-needed review of the housing delivery objective, currently TRL, both of which needed a review against the current changing climate. We're going to talk about housing delivery a little later on tonight. But new and significant investment activity no longer features in our MTFS for multiple reasons. The market is not what it once was, and it isn't just about COVID, or the fact that councils once being entrepreneurial like once encouraged is now being reassessed, or the fact that an opposition group who took credit for the approach just last year now claim a false fury and therefore reduce confidence in others investing in our borough. The world has changed, so must we. We can lament on the fact that a number of non-statutory and discretionary services will now no longer be possible, after existing funding allocations we provided as one-offs are used up. We can labour away at the fact that our approach, which was designed to give the council a few more years to reform services more slowly, will wind down quicker, means we will have to review services quicker than once planned. And this is where it was so meaningful. When politics was put aside back in October 2017, February 2018, February 2019, when all councillors of all colours voted for the approach we took. It has only ever been about providing services not mandated of a council to fund, and to give more breathing space to reform and reduce the size of the council whilst impacting our residents as little as possible. And not to mention the approach has worked, 9 months into a once-in-a-100-year international event. We can have assurances and should take a sincerely deep regard for the meaningfulness of our external audit. For the 6th year running, we have been given the most positive opinion and a value for money conclusion for our plans into the future. For the sign-off, was formalised on the 30th of November. So when the report went to Standards and Audit, it was in draft format. I can confirm tonight that the full sign-off has been received, and that was completed on the 30th of November. And I can also confirm that our accounts leader were all signed off within target date. Section 2 of the report articulates some of the COVID reality on the services themselves. £15 million worth of direct pressures in year, mitigated in very decent part by national government support, but with pressures still to bear. With the extra support coming from SR20, members will now see why it is critical that we await the detailed settlement position so we can present a more specific position as we enter the budget round. The larger issues I will cover. We have spent £4.3 million on supporting our adult care market, a service which hasn't operated at capacity owing to people living at home with family more than ever, as the work from home ethic has changed. But it is a service which we will need post-COVID. We simply cannot afford a collapse of that market. We are anticipating £2 million worth of children's social care pressures, notably delayed referrals and additional referrals from earlier in the year coming through and presenting in larger number in a small period of time. And obviously, we've paid £2.2 million on supporting rough sleepers with temporary accommodation to make sure that everyone is kept as safe as possible during this terrible time. From a capital programme perspective, the council has a saving, or an underutilised spend against budget rather, of £20 million against £114 million in year forecast. £19.7 million of that, Leader, is owing to the rephasing, including £13 million of what the council is now deferring or putting on hold whilst we prioritise key projects that we need to deliver, and that simply goes back to the choices between wants and needs. Capital budgets and spending remains under review by the relevant projects team, given the COVID-induced pressures that I think we all know about. From a borrowing perspective, the council's gross borrowing stands, as of 30th September, at £1.3 billion. That is a fluctuating figure, depending on capital requirements around programme delivery at any point in time. And the borrowing breakdown is as thus. Circa £300 million hard debt, and that has been in this council's borrowing profile since 2012. This is the cumulative debt of past and present capital projects. Circa £100 million on CCLA investment, which was completed before 2016. And circa £900 million of borrowing, which was approved by Conservative, Labour, UKIP/Thurrock independent councillors unanimously for 3 years consecutively in 2017, 2018 and 2019. There has been dialogue about council taking or looking at PWLB funding. That was for capital refinancing and was not used for a new investment, either before or after any recent announcement. The assessment between borrowing type has always been a fluid activity, and whilst the interest rate difference does make an adverse difference, instead of making £35 million to fund above statutory services, we are now making £34.3 million worth, circa. But as I said earlier, the intention to wind down the approach will mean a number of things. Notably less services for our residents as that additional income for non-statutory services phases out. But it does also mean, however, that we will see a phased reduction in borrowing levels as investments mature with corresponding reductions to the net income that they provide for the deliveries of services. As has always been part of the plan, as services were reformed over the longer term, the additionality of funding non-stat services wouldn't need to be so high, so borrowing was always going to reduce anyway. But it is now anticipated as having to happen quicker, and the changes to services and the lack of funding for public priorities, which we have funded from a discretional basis, will be notable. Our investments continue to be split between repayable bond investments in various renewable energy sectors. along with some property investment around the CCLA, and as mentioned, continue to pay out several months after the pandemic began, which is converse to commercial property investments, which this authority rejected back in the infancy of its investment approach. I think had the Spending Review 2020 happened a few weeks earlier, I'd probably be painting a less sobering picture, but it would have been an improved picture nonetheless. The Council has overcome large deficits before, and whilst the budget setting will go down to the last minute, I'm sure people come to expect, or should expect, that will be the case for all councils across our country. Our reserves positions are healthier than what they once were, to the tune of 131% on the levels we inherited in 2016, and again, those one-off reserve allocations, when they need to be used in part, will help us to provide the stimuli to services, whilst they reform at the most considerate pace possible for the residents that we serve.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hebb. In the chamber, are there any statements to or questions in relation to this? Again, Councillor Howland.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hebb, for your statement. It is sobering that this pandemic has flipped a budget surplus into such a large deficit. In terms of social care, there are a number of things that we've done. I just want to put on record how grateful and how proud I am of the social care team, Roger Harrison, Sheila Murphy, and all of our frontline staff. We've been able to put in place resilience payments to the market, a care uplift of 5%, the foster care tax cut, new social care reserves. All of these things are things that, frankly, lots of councils just don't have the headspace to even consider. So we've made tremendous steps. And there's more we can do going forward. Our consultation on domiciliary care fees has now ended. This means that we now can close the funding gap between what we charge and what domiciliary care actually costs. We're expanding Head Start housing. Myself and the leader approved a new procurement of a home just a fortnight ago, which will help keep young people leaving care not only in Thurrock in their own community, but it drives down the cost of external placements. And earlier on this year, myself and Councillor Johnson visited Medina Road, our new facility for autism care. All these things will drive down costs. But I really want to signal the steep challenge we've got going forward. The fact is, a recession causes economic breakdown, that causes social breakdown, it causes a rise in mental health issues, it causes a rise in domestic abuse issues. That means more children will come into care. We need to get used to the fact that our base of 288 children in care is likely to be expanded for a while. The NHS is hugely backed up. That means that there are people not being able to access certain treatments through the health service. So some adults are coming into our service sooner than we would expect, and the issues that they are coming forward with are more complex than we would expect. Certainly myself and the leader for the last several years have been very critical about how certain parts of the health service manage mental health issues. These problems are being exacerbated. So the grants that we've had from central government are hugely helpful, but the truth is our care cohort is going to be bigger and it's going to be more complex for several years going forward. So that means that we need to accept the fact that we need to create more headroom in the base, not just one-off grants, to deal with what is a very challenging social care outlook going forward. Yet there are things we could be grateful for. Head Start housing is bringing down the bills. The housing option delivery paper that Councillor Coxon and Councillor Johnson will be talking about later, that does provide options for care in Thurrock instead of expensive external placements, and certainly the incredibly robust reserves position that Councillor Hebb has spoken about means that we are in a position where we do have more breathing space than many other local authorities to put in place the provisions that we need to. So my message is that we're not at the bottom of the rabbit hole in terms of social care yet. We have not yet felt the full extent of the financial pressure on the care system. But we're fortunate in Thurrock, we've got a peerless team in terms of social care and in terms of finance. So if we attack this problem in a honest way and confront the issues with realism, I'm confident that Thurrock can continue to lead the way as we always have done.
Thank you, Councillor Howden. Anybody else in the chamber? No? Any members online wish to add anything before I do? No, I mean, there are a number of residents that I tend to interact with fairly often. If I'm walking into town, I'll bump into invariably the same people. And it was raised before we went into the first set of tiers from one person I speak to regularly. He's saying, you know, you're always saying how good the financial position is and how good the financial position is. How comes it's changed? And it's just like, well, you know, you would have noticed the pandemic. There has been costs that we go to that have not been covered by the exceptionally fantastic grants from central government, and they have been quite wide-ranging, but unfortunately they don't always go as far as we need to in Thurrock. So you've got that just as a starter. We've got an increase on the call for the local council tax scheme, which again comes out of the council tax collection fund. So there's an extra amount of money that we weren't expecting to come out of the budget. When we go forward into following years, we're expecting new properties to come on, to be completed and be on, you know, a part of the council tax base. That's not happening, which means we're not collecting expected council tax increases, which, although it may sound funny for those that have never worked in council tax and local government finance, and I'm looking at Councillor Johnson here specifically, we know each year, you know, the government, local authorities supply to government the expected council tax base for the coming years and coming quarters, based on, you know, what we know is through the pipeline from planning and property inspections. But of course, when the nation shuts down effectively for 3 months, everything goes on hold. And then, you know, with our great build programme as we go forward as a nation, you know, we do have a limited amount of people that will be able to do that. So there will be extensions on that. And we can, I won't say wax lyrical on this for a huge amount of time, but the extra pressures are unexpected and significant. Yes, we've lost parking income, just as an example. That parking income is used for highways projects, and, you know, helps go to fund the support we supply for buses. Well, if that's down, then, you know, we've still got to supply the support that we've promised to bus routes, and, you know, we have to start rolling back, as Councillor Hebb, those wants rather than those needs when it comes to highway projects. But also, again, you know, a great grant from central government, but, you know, the formula of we pay 75% of the 95% of your lost income. Anyone who can work out any kind of percentage knows that that's not 100%. So we did take a hit, not just on that, but on many other sources of income. So it's not just, well, the government's covered everything and the council's just spend. It's not. Far from it. We have rolled back a lot of our expenditure. We can't roll back expenditure on projects that have already started. I'm not going to start naming them. I think we all know which ones indeed. Passing the council offices extension at the front, that's going on leaps and bounds, and obviously, as you mentioned before, that can be seen through our web page of the stop time photography, which is a really good step forward, and that will continue when we get to move towards the underpass and everything else that we've committed money for to do, and that will continue. But equally, we need to up the pace of things like the sale of this particular part of the building for 80 much-needed flats. 80 much-needed flats is an increased council tax base, which is increased money into the pot for us to be able to supply the services that we need to supply. So that very long statement from me doesn't need a response, Councillor Hebb. But if there's no more questions, I'm happy to move to the recommendations on page 65, which are Cabinet comment on the MTFS and the forecast outturn position for 2021, and agree that Thurrock's 2021-22 schools funding formula be implemented as stated in section 16, this being consistent with the Cabinet's decision made in February 2020. Is that agreed? Agreed. Yeah, I'm getting nods online as well, so thank you very much for that. I shall now move to the next item, which is page 103 to 112, which is the Environment Health Jurisdiction, DP World Distribution Park, and that is me, as just pointed out. This may seem a little strange to elected members. The Corporation of London, which is the council, for want of a better word, for the square mile, slap bang in the centre of London does have responsibilities for a significant amount of other work outside of that square mile. And one of those is port health, which is everything along the Thames that form part of the Thames port. Part of this is already in existence at DP World, environmental health services for food inspections, for instance, coming from overseas. I had the pleasure of going to visit that a number of years ago, and the work they do there is absolutely fantastic. Perhaps a precursor of the current situation that we're in, walking into an environment, being asked to space ourselves out while sort of keeping a distance from the staff that were opening up these crates. And then very secondly, you found one of the crates that was quite clearly going to be rejected. The pleasure of knowing that you were at least 2 metres away from the things that were leaping out of it. Unfortunately, the jurisdiction of the Corporation of London is limited, and it's limited to the port. Now with the distribution park going forward for DP World, they would be outside of that, which would mean an absolute waste of everybody's time and effort of them having to pass goods and services, goods that come into the UK and they have certified as okay, that certificate and every bit of paperwork being passed to us, for us then to do the bit that's outside of the port in the distribution park, and then for that same block of items to go back to the port with a new set of paperwork for the Corporation of London to then take over again for that item to be shipped off somewhere else in the world. It doesn't make logistical sense, it doesn't make common sense. The paper before us is to approve the extension of the jurisdiction of the Corporation of London to encompass the extended area within DP World. I'm all in favour of working closely with other local authorities. I'm also very, very huge fan of not duplicating or making work for ourselves. You know, long gone are those days where you can create something to give somebody a job. As we just heard, with financial pressures on every local authority and indeed everybody across the world, we need to simplify what we're doing, and this paper seeks to do that. So with that, are there any questions in relation to this paper in the chamber? Nothing? Anything online? I think I like it when I present reports in relation to my area. So with that, and there's no further discussion, I will move to the recommendations on pages 103 and 104. The Cabinet authorises the Director of Place in conjunction with the Head of Legal and Portfolio Holder for Public Protection and Social Behaviour to enter into an agreement on behalf of Thurrock Council and with the Corporation of London to transfer jurisdiction for the environmental health matters pertaining to food law enforcement within DP World Distribution Park from Thurrock Council to the Corporation of London. Catching a breath, is that all agreed? Agreed, and nodding online, thank you. So with that, we'll move to the next item, which is found at pages 111, and that's a housing development delivery approach. Excuse me, I find that. And for that, it's a joint report, and I shall pass over to Councillor Coxall first, and then to Councillor Barry Johnson. Councillor Coxall.
Thank you, Leader. This administration, when it took control in 2016, and me as portfolio holder for planning and regeneration, we have a guiding principle that we want to build homes for local people that they can afford. And this paper, in conjunction with the local plan, which you mentioned earlier, in the next 2 years, will make sure we can deliver on some of that. And we've got to make sure that renting or buying, this Conservative Council is here for you. As we move into the next year of the local plan, which you touched on earlier, which I would try to call now the year of the local plan in 2021, it's really important that the council looks at its land and what it can do to actually deliver these new homes for children of their next generation and for the next 25, 30 years. We have now, with this paper, we'll have a mixed approach as well moving forward, so that if we have one delay on one project, we can still move forward and not see delays in the overall policy. And that's an important part of here tonight, is that mixed approach. if we look forward, look at one important part of this policy that I think I am completely proud of is the policy of building more council houses. The council house policy is really critical to actually delivering this at a low rent. And we've already announced 1,000 council houses, but with this paper, I would like to go further and make further commitments on that and to come forward in the near future. With that, I can pass over to my colleague. But actually, I'd just like to mention about the local plan at the point now, because the local plan was announced today, and I look at the year of local plan. It's really important on top of this. This is the council's commitment to this, but obviously, with the private sector and residents need to do that. If they don't do that, what we'll have is they won't be. It's not just about homes. The local plan. It's about the communities and work, rest and play, and where you live, and what the communities and the infrastructure. But this is for our part of that, and that's what we can move forward on.
And Councillor Cockshaw, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Leader. A big here, Councillor Cockshaw, for everything you said there. I'd just like to give my thanks, first of all, to all concerned with the preparation of this report, because it certainly has been back and forth several times. And I'd like to add how pleased I am that we are now able to look to adopt a mixed approach to our housing delivery, which should increase the council's capacity to deliver. I'm very pleased the report shows we're committed to our delivery and in using our established approach processes and criteria for identifying potential housing development sites, which is updated regularly and presented at Housing O&S meetings for discussions. I'd just like to add, we do have some sites that are potentially very close to starting development, and also progress on 7 other sites has begun following the pause on public consultation due to the pandemic, with a further pipeline of sites being prepared from a review of the council's assets. But I finish quickly by just confirming that the options to improve capacity in this report are not mutually exclusive. So just because it's not in the report doesn't mean we won't look at it. If it is in the report, doesn't mean that's what we're going to do. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Indeed, thank you, Councillor Cockshaw. Councillor Hebb, you have a question?
Just a couple of points. Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Cockshaw and Johnson, for the report. This is a report that a number of us have spent a long time talking about. And why I particularly like this report, or the approach that we're now looking to undertake if we all vote for it, is the diversification of delivery. We know that we've had a scheme in TRL when we've had an opposition which are getting very animated about certain things in terms around TRL. But the frank reality is that we've had to have a look at our whole approach and to have a diversified approach to make sure that if there are fluctuations in one market, that may be compensating others to deliver the ultimate objective of the 1,000 homes. We can rehearse history as much as we like. If we talk about Belmont Road, Leader, frankly, the delay to Belmont Road did have a tangible financial impact, and therefore we need to assess the situation, and that is why this paper is the bare bones of a more diversified approach, but collaborative as well. This isn't just about diversified in terms of the way we're looking, but collaborative with different partners outside in the market to support the delivery of sites, do our bit to the local plan and recycling sites that we've got. So I know there is a lot more work to come, but there's a lot of work that's gone into this paper, and so you've got my full support and sponsorship for the approach.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Cox, you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I can. If you mentioned Belmont Road, and it's one of them that we had one policy to deliver through. Both the last administration and this administration was trying to drive through with that. And this mixed approach is really important, and I'm going to hang my hat on how we can actually do that, like I mentioned earlier in my speech. But what this also means is it's sunlight of how we do it, because it's really important. How many years in Thurrock have we seen land, and who at that land and what land we've got? And like we've started, Councillor Johnson started early in the year, look, there was lots of problems and lots of people upset about land. We're being open and honest here. This sunlight is the best disinfectant, and that's what we're trying to do here. You can see the mixed delivery approach here. We can't go on. There is an issues around Belmont Road, and that's what's moved us to a mixed approach. And we've got to carry on delivering them housing policy numbers for them homes, and they're homes for family and your children. And your daughter will need a home in 20 years' time, and that's the only way to deliver it.
I was just going to say, unfortunately, Councillor Hibbs' daughter's not still free. She hasn't been free for a number of years. As I found out
Didn't leave home till 4.
as I found at last birthday. Councillor Howden.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I just want to, just what Councillor Coxhill said about wanting to go further than our initial commitment on council housing. The reason I welcome that so much is that I think people have quite an outdated view that you either have a private house or you have a council house. I think what we've proven is the massive social value of housing. In terms of Head Start housing, helping care leavers get on the housing ladder, we know we've got a huge amount of young adults in this borough with autism and with other complex health needs because of the 2 outstanding special needs schools here. You know, Medina Road, as great as that site is, that was a converted family mosaic house. It was a long build, it was a slow build, it was expensive. So by pushing the boat out, by pushing further, saying we want more than just the initial amount of council housing we initially announced, we want to build more and we want to build more diverse options. We are literally saying to every family in this borough that if you've got a child with special needs or if you've got a family member who is ageing and having more complex needs, we will create the type of housing to ensure that your loved ones can stay in their own community and can be cared for properly. So in my mind, this paper is not just about making sure we can throw up mortars and bricks. It's about making sure that we can help families yes, live, work and play in the borough, but also age in the borough and age well in the borough. And I think that's what this paper helps to deliver.
Thank you, Councillor Howden. Any other questions? Sorry, Councillor Coxhill.
I completely agree with that. What I would offer is obviously, I understand it was a great members' conversation earlier this week about the local plan. There's another one meeting next week. I urge every member and anyone members listed to go to that and get involved because there is a rounded conversation next year, and this paper, as well as the local plan, and as well as our assets and our what we're doing about what we own, are intrinsic, and they are not. They're all together, and I hope over in scrutiny of all them chairs work together as that and come back and see it as a round.
Thank you. Members that are remote, are there any questions or statements? I'm seeing one shaking head. No? Okay. No, I shall stick my piece in now. And yes, I'm going to go back to the last bit you said, 2021 being the year of the local plan. It's been too long coming. Hopefully we can get this one in before the government change their mind again, as we have to start the process yet again. And that's no slight on either government or indeed the local authorities, again, irrespective of political party. We've all worked hard in the past to get forward. We just get to the point we're about to, and then the rules will change. And it is now for residents to take part. And as Councillor Coxhill will know, we had best part of a year's worth of leader and relevant portfolio holder and or deputy leader discussions with the other groups in relation to taking forward the first part of the local plan, which were again very productive. Even if we did spend quite a lot of time deciding what colour we should put certain items in. And whilst that sounds silly, actually it made a huge difference. And it made it so much easier to understand. So we've done as much as we can now, and now it's out to the public, which is absolutely great. This obviously sort of ties in with this. I echo everything that's been said about different models and different types, and that also extends to let's be innovative in the way that we are these housing developments are delivered. I was quite fortunate when I had the housing portfolio to go up to the Housing Research and Development Centre. I can't remember the exact location, but up further north a little bit than us. And it was absolutely spectacular. You saw things that looked like something out of the Flintstones and looking like sort of caves where there were concrete pods that were made, and the insides are absolutely fantastic. And they say, well, we deliver them pretty much on site. Houses that are up on cantilevers to ensure that we can get parking underneath. There's so many wide different sort of building types, but again, it's not just building types, it's a type of delivery. And as Councillor Howden said, it's not just buy or rent or buy to rent. It's various models that help everybody in different circumstances. We all know the average price of a house in Thurrock is ever upwards. We all have to appreciate that affordable housing is affordable for those that can afford it, rather than affordable for everybody. Unfortunately, it's nearly impossible to be able to deliver houses that everybody can afford, because not everybody would be able to afford a lower price affordable house. So I do welcome this. I do welcome the approach. We will all have to work together to deliver some of these more difficult sites as we go through this process. We can't have another situation where one administration goes forward with a particular site, the second administration goes forward with the same site, and the same problems occur, and we end up, as Councillor Hebb intimated, with a financial cost, and more importantly, 80 homes that haven't been delivered and 80 families that are not in one of those homes. And that's, okay, the income's great as well, but the reality is that's 80 families that are either renting, who could be starting on, as Councillor Hebb likes to say, the life's ladder, and on the property ladder are there, and obviously, locally, 80 more homes contributing into the local community, whether that be shopping local, having their children talk local, or indeed working and playing local, which, as Councillor Coxall keeps on reminding us, it's the local plan. It's not just about housing. It is about where you work, where your children go to school. It's about where you shop. It's about where you can shop, where you can get entertained, where you work and play. That's place. And we are thinking about the place where people live, so that can be delivered. So with that, I'm going to move to the recommendations as outlined on page 112, which is to agree to adopt a mixed approach to housing development delivery in order to improve the council's capacity to increase delivery rate, and note the potential schemes to be brought forward for approval in line with the council's constitution in due course. Is that agreed in the chamber? Agreed. Is that agreed online? Agreed. I see two people nodding. So with that, thank you very much. We're going to move to the next item, which is item 14 on page 119, which is the sheltered housing decommissioning at Alexandra Road and Dunlop Road. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Leader. I'm particularly pleased to be actually reporting this or showing this tonight, because I think it shows a clear, joined up and forward planning approach. The proposal in front of you this evening results from a report in March 2019 regarding the condition of communal entrance points in our sheltered housing complexes across the stock. The 40 properties that collectively form what is known as Alexandra Court were shown to have many constraints which would hamper any remedial work, as the assessment of the access to the blocks indicated they do not currently meet the standards which the council aim to achieve. The three options that were considered are clearly marked in the report as A, B and C, where it was immediately clear that any required remedial standard access works to the blocks will be very disruptive to residents, as it would be highly likely that temporary decants will be needed, and should the council even have undertaken any improvement works, it would still not necessarily render each individual flat as suitable for residents with limited mobility. It was found, however, that option C, to commission the complex from sheltered housing usage, would still cause a level of disruption to residents, as they would be required to move, but it was considered that this was the best option to ensure residents are housed swiftly to a safe and secure environment. The sheltered housing service will not be withdrawn whilst there are any tenants remaining at the complex, and to ensure a smoother experience for residents, it is proposed that a local lettings plan be put in place which would prioritise those tenants wishing to do so be decanted to the soon-to-be completed Beaconsfield Place development, which, as the report identifies, is only approximately 400 metres away from Alexandra House. Tenants not wishing to take up residency at Beaconsfield Place will be awarded the highest priority band on the council's housing register, which would allow them to consider moving to other sheltered housing complexes or appropriate properties elsewhere. If the recommendation is agreed this evening, I can confirm that all residents will be fully supported by a dedicated officer who will provide help with all key elements of moving home, and once residents begin to move, these properties will be left void. This proposal has undergone considerable consultation both with residents, ward councillors and the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee, with the feedback taken into consideration, the results of which can be clearly seen in this report. And it is further proposed that only once a complete block is voided would they be considered as possible temporary accommodation for our homeless families, which is of course something we have very little of within Thurrock. It should also be pointed out that the decommissioning of this complex in the longer term would allow the site to be considered as a redevelopment opportunity once it had been through our housing development process to provide new council-owned family homes. So you can see what I said, Leader, about it being a joined up and forward-thinking report. So on that note, I'll pass it back to you, Leader, to ask if any colleagues have any questions or comments before seeking the agreement.
Thank you for that, Councillor Johnson. I'm going to bring in Councillor Mays first and then Councillor Hebb. Councillor Mays, obviously, as a ward councillor in Tilbury. Please feel free.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for the report. The consultation, as you said, has been very, very good, and obviously I've been spoken to, and I know, I've given my feedback on this, because actually, when I became councillor last year, one of the first things I did was actually go around and speak to the residents of this this area, and actually, it wasn't great. They did mention a lot of things that, like was mentioned in here about accessibility and standards. So I'm absolutely pleased with this. And actually, in speaking to residents firsthand, all of the people that I've spoke to, and that's no exaggeration, all the people I've spoken to that have come to me about this have been very, very happy that they're getting these fantastic accommodation in the new flats, as they call it. So it's going to be fantastic for them, much better for the area, and actually the forward thinking and planning element is just, is brilliant. And I don't want to labour a point too much, but I do think that this is where it had local councillors that didn't actually particularly do very much for the area for too long, and now I think actually getting someone that actually wants to work with our administration and actually do lots for Tilbury can actually create lots of benefits. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mays. Anything to come back on there, Councillor? No? Councillor Hebb?
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Councillor Johnson, for a very wholesome report. The section in 4.2 around the temporary accommodation for homelessness, we talked about that £2.2 million pressure. Behind every pound is a person, and frankly, if we can do something to help that situation, that is something that's extraordinary. The one thing I would say that is very extraordinary in this report and really stuck out at me was the consultation, or at least the informal consultation before the EOI, the expression of interest or activity that has to happen in January. I mean, the report's literally got 2 pages of consultation feedback, and if I interpret it right, sort of 36 out of about 40 properties have all engaged and have been able to engage, whether that be through social distance face-to-face, whether it be over the phone or supported by a next of kin, depending on the vulnerability circumstances. And as you can see in 5.3, it articulates that about 71% of people have said that they're interested in the new Beaconsfield place. Councillor Johnson, I don't really know much more anticipative you can be in terms of trying to help people move on the journey and see what else is out there. I think it's great to see. I think it's going to allow for a considered, a managed, a well-structured transition for people who have probably been very used to where they are, but can hopefully move to something much better and allow us to do something different with the site at another point in time. But no, that was the thing that really struck out at me, the informal consultation element, and congratulate the housing team who do come under some, attacks sometimes, but the fact that the consultation has been so comprehensive as it is here, fair play.
Thank you, Councillor Hebb. Any member online wish to add anything or say anything in relation to this? Shaking of heads. Okay. I'm going to now again congratulate officers and indeed Councillor Johnson in relation to this. We're looking at an old building, which probably whoever was sitting here at the time, well, it wouldn't have been here, it would have been completely different offices at the time, would have said, this is really good forward-thinking planning for our residents that are getting, older in life. It will be supporting them in a new, ultra-modern way, and was probably, right ahead of its time. Unfortunately, time's moved on, and it isn't. And I think one of the best ways to sort of get that across is on page 120. The development will have indoor communal spaces, private communal gardens for residents, ample parking and mobility scooter storage. It's 20 years ago, 10 years ago, you might have seen one or two. And now it's one of the largest requests that I understand that we get. It's a very difficult situation to add these scooter sheds and storage spaces and charging points in, because everywhere was not designed for that, and we have to design them now in line with fire regulations and make sure we're not putting trip hazards forward to everybody else. So that just one paragraph for me sums it up why we need to move from where we are to where we're going forward. So it's absolutely brilliant. Everything else has pretty much been covered. In relation to the consultation, it's really good that such a high level of input. I'm sure, but I'd love to say this will be great, we won't get any complaints. I'm sure one or two complaints maybe will come forward, but we'll deal with that, and we won't just say, well, you had your chance for consultation. We'll still work with our residents to make sure that they get the best deal as they move on to their next home, which may be the home for the rest of their life. And that we won't be putting people into those places that can't actually work with something that's designed probably, as I say, probably 60s, 70s, maybe not much longer than that. So with that, I'm going to move to the recommendations on page 119 to approve the proposal of the decommissioning the sheltered properties at Alexandra Road and Dunlop Road in Tilbury, and note the comments on the proposal to implement local lettings plan for the new housing development for older people at Calcutta Road, which gives priority to tenants affected by the above proposed decommissioning. Are we all in agreement with that? Agreed in chamber, agreed online. Excellent, thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, which is page 127, which is the independent review of the local Safeguarding Children's Partnership. Councillor Howden.
Thank you, Leader. When I took this portfolio on, I committed that we were going to be as transparent and open as possible to ensure that the safeguarding of our children becomes everybody's business. This report is the outcome of a full review of our local Safeguarding Child Partnership. This was not a light touch peer monitoring exercise, but was a full-scale review from an external expert with years as a senior leader in the field, who had carte blanche to speak to leaders as well as frontline operatives in the council, health service and police service. In line with our commitment, we have now publicly published the full report and the recommendations so everyone can see the state of our safeguarding functions. As you can see, there have been no red flags from this PACE report, which is in line with the good Ofsted judgment that Children's Services had a few years ago. There have been areas identified as learnings and areas where outcomes can be improved, and that is precisely what we wanted to see. The business of protecting children is never done, and complacency is not okay. I'm pleased that cross-party members on overview and scrutiny, and the three professional partners who make up the partnership have welcomed the report and supported its recommendations without qualification. There's one recommendation that I wish to highlight, and a recommendation that I urged to be included, giving the partnership its full independence by reconstituting an independent chairmanship. Currently, the leadership rotates between the three partners. While this has not caused any notes of concern in the PACE report or Ofsted, there is the prospect that a rotating chair provides little permanency and stability and does not lend itself to the level of critical friendship and independence that we all have the right to be reassured of. We will now fix this before it becomes an issue. This change gives a chairman, free of entanglement with any partner organisation, the ability to act without fear or favour, to ask questions wherever they arise, and to hold any organisation to account to the fullest extent of the partnership. And it gives confidence to the public by ensuring clear blue water between between the organisations who provide services and this partnership that reviews those services. Finally, the intent is, at the annual review that we are asking for, that we review the capacity of the refresh partnership arrangement to ensure that we are reviewing the near-miss cases as well as the formal learning practice reviews. Understandably, there is always a great deal of interest in serious case reviews, now called learning practice reviews. However, it's vital the partnership does not just focus on these few rare events, and instead is continuously challenging and learning from other situations which don't always meet the full criteria of a full and formal review. This new approach to the joint funding of the partnership between all organisations should help facilitate this. This work is an example of what Thurrock is all about in regards to social care. Never settling, even with the backdrop of good results and good inspections, and always looking for new ways to ensure that the wider Children's Services family has the support and focus that it needs to make sure we protect more children in a faster and comprehensive manner. There are very few authorities and very few partnerships where they would welcome additional scrutiny, additional challenge from a strong independent partner. Thurrock is that type of partnership, and I commend the report to the Chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Howden. Any questions in the Chamber in relation to this? Councillor Hebb?
Not so much the questions, but just around the integrity around the independent chairmanship piece. I think you've aptly articulated the benefit of that. I think it creates an objectivity within the process in itself, but like any chairperson, and it's a real logistical point, but when you're a chairperson, you end up facilitating a meeting and crowd managing as much as contributing. So actually to have three such critical partners that have equal weight without the requirement to facilitate the piece, I think is very essential, certainly in a topic like this. And I think it's something that that will set the committee up in great stead. So very, very much support that particular component.
Thank you, Councillor Hebb. Any other in the Chamber? Councillor Coxhill?
There's been a lot said about this department over the last couple of years, and a few years, and the people working in it. Will this go some way to allay public concerns and the media locally?
Well, I think it's important to point out that when we have had these public concerns, when the partnership, which is independent from the council, has published the report about those instances have never found culpability in any organisation. So that's important to point out. But what this report does is demonstrate the ethic of what we're doing. At the moment, Thurrock Council happens to chair the partnership. We are voluntarily relinquishing that chair because we have got no problem with an independent person combing over us constantly, because we know that in the past when we've had these reports, often, unfortunately, unacceptable delays in these reports outside of our control, but we know that these reports have showed good work, good frontline work in social care. And when I said I would like an independent person to chair this body, I don't want us to be in control anymore, no one from within the council or from either partner organisations argued that that was the right thing to do. So I think that in terms of giving that public confidence, what we're saying to the public is that Ofsted inspections, reviews have showed us that our social care function is good and is sound, and we're going a step further and we are inviting even more challenge, because we can always improve. There are always mistakes that are going to be made, and we can always improve, we can always learn, and I think that shows the type of mentality that we have. We've got no problem with, what's your phrase, we've got no problem with sunlight being dumped on us, because I think that's a very, sunlight is the best disinfectant, and I've got no problem with this partnership sunbathing.
Thank you, Councillor Howden. Those online, any questions or statements before I make mine? No. Councillor Howden and I have worked fairly closely on this, which has been absolutely great. I do allow all of my cabinet free rein to carry on do the work that I've been entrusted with. Pretty much whatever a dog and bark yourself, really. And everyone does a really great job. And there are some times where it does need that extra bit of support. And this, as soon as Councillor Alvin said, well, I think we should move to an independent chair, and it's because it's like, don't finish a sentence. It's quite clear. Because it's very quick and very clear for people to make the allegations. Well, you're controlling the outcome of your reports, and you look at it from outside, and you always sort of take that. Someone landed on Earth and sort of had a basic understanding of what we do, would say, well, why is one of those organisations that's being asked questions also chairing that particular committee? It could lead to it being the appearance that it's being skewed. Now, that's never happened in real life, but it's very easy to put 2 and 2 together and get 5 with that. And this takes that away and puts that independence back into it, which is really welcome. Not just for for me as leader of the council, but for the officers involved as well. It's very quick to sort of throw allegations, irrespective whether that's from members of the public or indeed members of the press, whether they're right or wrong. This is it's the most tragic incidents that will happen to children being investigated, and to also have that expanded to ones that are near misses, not just the ones that are unfortunately tragically passed away for whatever reason. I think it's also a fantastic step forward. It's great to learn from mistakes. Unfortunately, having to learn from these not just mistakes, these are tragedies, and to be able to learn from something that could have been a tragedy and hasn't been is also welcome, because it only takes that little bit more and that then becomes a tragedy. So it's really good to see that, and like I say, I welcome this. It was really refreshing to have the conversations with Councillor Howden and others in relation to this, and I think it gives that bigger security for all 3 organisations. I'm not just saying because we're chairing it at the moment. It could well be that when the police are chairing it, someone's saying, "Well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that," and then you're chairing it, so you're, it's bias against the truth coming out, which these should never do. So, as has been said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Having this out in the open and showing what we're doing to change, it is the right thing. It should give people more confidence that this isn't just everyone looking after themselves in authority, because we don't do that. We don't learn from mistakes, then unfortunately more tragic incidences, more children die. Councillor Howden?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. And I do very much appreciate your support as we've gone through this process. As elected members, none of us work for the council, and if we ever felt that there was wrongdoing or if there was an inadequate service, I'm sure none of us would have a problem shopping the council, because we want the best for our residents. That's what is our priority, not the organisation. And if there's a mistake, we would always want that mistake outed. But what I would say is that when I said, I don't just want a peer review, I want a proper expert to come in. My director, Sheila Murphy, and my assistant director, Joe Tyne, both said, that's a really good idea. And when we said, after I consulted with the leader, I think an independent chairmanship, not an independent scrutineer, which some councils have, a proper independent chairmanship where we go out for advert and we recruit a very high calibre individual to take this away from us, to apply more challenge. Once again, our officers said that is a very good idea. So whilst there are always going to be issues that we need to learn from, and we can never be complacent, I am comforted by the fact that at the prospect of additional scrutiny, additional challenge, additional pressure to improve, at each stage, the senior officers who work with me on a daily basis all said that is a good idea, and I think that is a good mentality to have.
Excellent, thank you, Councillor Howden. I'm going to move to the recommendations on page 128. Cabinet to support the establishment of an independent chair to help further the partnership work and provide the critical friend function to all partners. And Cabinet requests a year's review to ensure that the partnership has the capacity to proactively review relevant cases of concern and not just formal SCRs stroke LPRs. Are both of those agreed in chamber? Agreed. And online? Agreed. Excellent. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Howden, for this really good report and step forward. Before I move on to item 16, I will remind everybody that there are exempt papers. And for those that are watching this online and have never come across this, there are sometimes when Cabinet cannot meet in open session, as we may disclose information that may be of benefit to those that may or may not be bidding in a process, for example, or for the way that the council is acting would give advantage to others or disclose information that might be of a personal nature. What we would normally do in circumstances like this, and the reason I explain this is because we very, very, very rarely have pink papers at Cabinet, so everybody is aware. What we would do is we would discuss those are parts of the paper that we can do in public session, and then we would make a vote to go to excluded session and exclude the press and public, which in this case is basically turn off the live feed for a period of time. We'd make the discussions, and then any recommendations would then be made at that point, and then made clear as part of the reporting process. Because there are two items, this does mean that we would hear first item going to exempt session should we need to, and then beyond that come back with recommendations, and then again start the next item, and again vote to decide whether to go to exclude the press and public, and if that's the case, we would then go to exempt item, and again turn off the live feed, deal with the inquiry, and then deal with the recommendations, come back and make those recommendations clear. So with that, I'm going to pass item 16, page 153, over to Councillor Cockshaw. Councillor Cockshaw, if you feel that we need to go into exempt session, if you just indicate that, and I'll take the vote.
I will give a brief breakdown of where we are, and then if any Cabinet wants to, but I don't think I will be touching on any of the exempt items. Okay. I hope this is my last report with no construction on a project. It's been a long time coming, but we may be finally here. This HIF funding of £75 million now makes a combined total of £150 million from Thurrock Council and the Conservative Government have invested into Purfleet Regeneration Project. Our delivery partner, Purfleet Regeneration Limited, must now start delivering. Over the last few months, there's been intense negotiations with PCRL to make the development agreement signed by the last administration slightly better and abide by the HIF guidelines. And with that long and hard work, we are now finally over, and why the paper is here tonight. We all want to see a brand new Purfleet on Thames with a town centre, some brilliant infrastructure, some great riverside entertainment, some fantastic new homes to make Purfleet a great place to work, live and play. It's now time to deliver on your promises, PCRL. After 6 years, we should be further forward than this, but we're moving on now. I will leave this with my Cabinet colleagues with a message. PCRL, you're in the last chance to loan. Get on. You have the money. You now have the planning decision. Time to get on with it and build them new homes.
Thank you, Councillor Cockshaw. Councillor Howden?
I just want to endorse the comments Councillor Cockshaw has made in regards to the last chance saloon. I think most members of the public will see a huge amount of money from the government, a huge amount of support from Thurrock Council, and people will be wondering why a house is not there yet. So it is now for PCRL to get these houses up, and for PCRL to also remember that it's not just the council that is watching them. The IMC programme has got 4 different NHS organisations watching it: Bowsden Hospital, Nelft, EPUT, and the STP. Everyone is looking at that PCRL site saying, we have got a desperate need for new modern health facilities there. We need you to do your part. We need PCRL to deliver. If they don't, we are not going to address the very serious health issues that the people of Purfleet deserve to have addressed. So it's not just the council, in my view, saying to PCRL that all eyes on you. Literally, all eyes are on you, from the government, from the council, from the health service. We need you to deliver. So I fully endorse what Councillor Cockshaw has said this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Howden. Councillor Hebb, sorry.
That's right. Thank you, Leader. Councillor Cockshaw, you make your point very clear. I think you only have to look at page 161 where we're talking about the award of contract being in October 2015 at Cabinet by the previous administration. We're now well past October 2015 to the tune of half a decade. This is a good step forward, but I think your point around line in the sand, time to deliver, I think is a fine and appropriate message for this juncture of where we are. The tools are now in place. Now it's about the doing.
Excellent, good point. Councillor Cox, do you want to come back on any of that before I go to?
It's you could tell the frustration for me over the many years with this. I don't think this goes back to 2013 or 2014 originally it goes back that long way. There is a long time. I've lived in Purfleet for years. We just recently only 3.5 years ago, I suppose. Now moved to Grade. But it was so looking forward to seeing that great time. When we first got in administration, me and Councillor Howden made sure that there was a senior school delivered there outside the Purfleet Regeneration Limited. We've still got a primary school there. You mentioned the IMC. We mentioned the new train station. We mentioned we need to do that riverfront and how we're enjoying that. And I want to see something happening in Purfleet before I see the Grays Towns Board deliver the jetties and the Shilbury Towns Board start delivering that in under 2 years. And this has been 6. And people of Purfleet deserve something there, and they have been fantastic. What I can say is there is a consummate thing with the residents have been brought into this, and it's a lot of housing, and I cannot see anything else that they realise the dividends of that infrastructure, and that is one thing that happened. But my frustration is I want to see this. I don't want to have 150 million. Like, first of all, it was 50 million pounds. Then it was 100 million pounds we needed. Now we're up to 150 million pounds. We've got to build something now, and we've got to see some fantastic new town centre so I can move back to Purfleet.
Thank you, Councillor Cockshill. Any member online wish to ask Councillor Cockshill to add anything? I've seen shaking of heads. Again, I don't really want to up my ship. I lived in Purfleet before you did. But the people of Purfleet on Thames do deserve exactly this. Obviously, pre-pandemic, when the Chief Executive and I would go to meetings, and there'll be discussions of how are we going to deliver 100,000 homes across the whole of South Essex? How are we going to do? And we'd sit there and go, well, first of all, it's not about the homes, it's about the infrastructure that goes in. And if you want to bring the residents of where you are along with you, they need to understand what they are getting out of this deal. And that is, as mentioned, the new schools, the IMC, new town centre. I mean, to have so fewer shops for so many residents is just, it's just absolutely shocking. You wouldn't see it anywhere else. And yes, that is the failure of the former Development Corporation. And I can say that with, sort of quite a clear conscience, because just go there. There are, fewer shops on the Garrison estate than there were when I lived there. There are fewer shops that were there by the station have disappeared, and there's thousands of new homes, and we will need to put 1,000 more new, or 2,500 more new homes there. But at least we're doing it now in the right order. The challenge has been placed very, very clearly on PCRL. Both Councillor Cockshill and I have met both together and separately with PCRL. We've had these discussions. We've had discussions about, but there would be, spades in the ground, and there would be this, and there would be that, and we still haven't seen that to the full degree. But I'm fairly sure that PCRL know our feelings, and I'm fairly sure that they will be able to deliver, because this is now not just money that they were going to raise themselves, but also, as Councillor Cockshill alluded to, £150 million worth of local taxpayers and indeed national taxpayers' money that's been ploughed into this project. So I do welcome this paper, and I will welcome progress reports as we go through. And again, one of those things, if we started off the meeting talking about overview and scrutiny and their role, perhaps a theme, or one of the themes that they could take on for housing planning and regeneration, is to monitor the progress of PCRL. Whether that be 6 monthly or quarterly, however they wish to do it. Again, I don't overly like to impose something on a chair of another committee. That's entirely in their gift. So with that, there are 3 long recommendations on page 154. To note the progress of the scheme in recent months, and in particular the positive best consideration sign-off and success of the HIF application by securing £75.1 million of central government investment into the borough. To note the key terms of the HIF grant determination agreement, and delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with Section 151 officer and portfolio holder for regeneration and strategic planning to negotiate the final terms and enter into a grant determination agreement with Homes England. And then finally, to approve the proposed variation described in Appendix 2 and delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the Section 151 officer, portfolio holder for regeneration and strategic planning to agree any final terms and the documentation to agree into a deed of variation to formally amend the development agreement in line with these proposals. Yeah, sorry, I think I misspoke. So with that, with the recommendation 1.1 A, B and C, are we all in agreement? Excellent, thank you very much. We'll move to our final item. Just for clarification, we're not moving into exempt items in relation to the perfect regeneration decision. So we'll move into final item, which is item 17, the purchase and development of land in Tilbury. Page is 181, and again, should Cabinet need to, I will call and vote to move to exempt session. If we do, the live feed will be discontinued while we have that, and then reapplied when we come to making the formal recommendations as outlined or amended. So with that, I'll move to Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Leader. I don't think anything I'll have to say will touch on the exempt papers. This report is actually a good example of how a more diverse housing delivery approach can work, as it involves a private sector developer purchasing the land, obtaining planning permission, and then selling it on to the council for a residential development of 27 new homes within the HRA and for rent in line with our allocation policies. The land involved has been vacant for many years and is in a very poor condition, and is not in keeping with the council's vision of the area's street scene. Whilst proposed construction and land purchase costs have been benchmarked, the final details of the proposed design and project costs will be dependent on a future planning application being brought forward. However, the design will be of a high quality to match the other council new builds, featuring high quality materials to achieve high sustainability and energy conservation standards, and the interior fit would recognise the council's ongoing repairing liability. It should be noted the funding of this project will seek to use the right to buy retention agreement with prudential borrowing within the HRA, therefore no general fund is required. As a note, I would add that should the new council tenants exercise their right to buy, the council investment is protected in that the cost floor rule applies, such that a resident's discount purchase price is limited during the first 15 years after construction, meaning the tenant's purchase price cannot fall below the cost of construction. I would recommend this purchase to my Cabinet colleagues, as it contributes to the council's demand for affordable housing and our delivery targets, whilst enabling us to quickly spend right to buy receipts, thus avoiding the requirement to make interest payments to the Treasury. But more importantly, this will significantly contribute to the regeneration of the area, bringing forward redevelopment at pace. Pass back to you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Coxall indicated he wishes to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, this goes again to the mixed approach, which is just not just one version of how we do it. We want to have other alternative, innovative ideas to deliver this. It also in Tilbury that the interest in the site. If the council can't deliver high quality housing that's above this normal standard, we can't get our private sector colleagues who are going to be delivering the majority of our housing over the next 30 years to increase the quality of the housing. So we've got to deliver that. In Tilbury, if you look at the very much older houses built in the 50s and 60s, we've got to go back to that quality that lasts for a long time. And we've got to not a 10-year cycle. We've seen that in other authorities very close to us, where our housing stock obviously was built of good quality when it's first built, and we need to do that. So yes, there is and Tilbury deserves this like this. On top of that, with the Tilbury Towns Board delivering there around the station, around the Civic Square, good quality homes there, and good quality jobs around the ports will be fantastic, and I think that's what we really need there. And again, I'm really pleased that this is delivering HRA council houses. Only a small amount, but it's a show that the mixed approach of the housing policy, which I approved earlier, is this part of it. We could go into private session about the other items if we wish.
Thank you, Councillor Coxall. Councillor Johnson, got anything you wish to come back on for past Councillor Hebb? Councillor Hebb?
I think as someone who sort of lived in Tilbury 12 years ago now, I think, I can't remember now, it's been a while. the fact of being able to regenerate this site is quite meaningful. It is a site that's long overdue something, and the one thing that I always reflect on is if you look around the borough, certainly a estate that has been developed by the council for council housing, like around the Crux estate for some of the new developments around there, the quality of housing is unbelievable. It is an excellent standard, and if it can be delivered by a diversified approach, again, that goes back to everything that we talked about earlier this evening. So, really positive.
Thank you, Councillor Hebb. Councillors that are online, any statements or questions in relation to the paper before I do mine and potentially move forward? So, no. I do agree with the statements that have been made. I wouldn't expect us to be building just an average property. And I won't say average isn't bad. Far from it. There are a significant amount of regulations in relation to building codes, building sizes, and it's great to be able to be in a position to be putting up properties that are different in a way, as Councillor Coxall touched on, is a different approach to doing this. Commissioning somebody to do all the work on our behalf and deliver 27 homes as soon as they possibly can in an innovative way, kind of touches what we've done on previous reports. But of course, with quality comes the obvious extra cost. And there are a few issues in relation to that I think I need to raise in exempt session. It's very rare for me to go into exempt session, but I would ask elected members in line with the exclusion of press and public in relation to item 17 under Part 1 of the Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, being that what we'll be discussing is confidential. Are we happy to move into exempt session? It may only be for a short time. Are we agreed in the chamber? Agreed online? Agreed? Okay, with that, I'm going to move to exempt session for a short period of time. Lucy, could you ensure that we are no longer online? Just to make clear to everybody, that exempt session has now come to an end, and we'll move to the recommendations. There are two recommendations in relation to this, and following the discussion, one of those will be slightly amended. So it will be 1.1 to approve the acquisition and development of the land identified in Appendix A. Is that agreed? Agreed. Online? Agreed. Nodding head. Thank you. 2, to delegate to the delegate authority to the Director of Place and the Director of Housing, Adults Health and Housing, in consultation with the Section 151 officer, the Cabinet Member for Regeneration, the Cabinet Member for Housing and the Leader, to commence negotiations and seek to agree the final terms for the acquisition of the site and the construction of the dwellings, to enter into any such agreements necessary to conclude the acquisition and terms of construction. Is that agreed? Excellent, thank you. It does mean that we can continue to show Tilbury some love with some absolutely fantastic properties coming forward, one of which is long overdue and welcome. So with that, I thank you for this exceptionally long Cabinet this evening. So again, I'd like to wish you all Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and call the meeting to an end at 21:28. Thank you.